couple of days ago, we did a 25-minute video describing what the classified Durham appendix actually shows. I argued that Kash Patel, John Radcliffe, certainly John Durham, have been framing Hillary Clinton for years. And Durham had to have discovered by July of 2021 that he was chasing Russian disinformation.
And it actually brings attention to the fact that there was either a Clinton conspiracy to make this happen or a Russian disinformation.
Rather than dropping his investigation, he continued on for 2 more years. And now Kash and John Radcliffe continue to chase it. They've resuscitated it. They are ignoring the fact that the Durham appendix shows that they were duped by Russian disinformation. They're claiming that it's still Hillary Clinton.
The new information that has been revealed by the Director of National Intelligence and by the FBI eliminates any scintilla of doubt about the intention, the premeditation, the planning and orchestration of this conspiracy.
So that's what we got to 2 days ago. Yesterday, I made a discovery, which is, I think, sort of important. It was funny. I was joking with my spouse yesterday, and he was like, you're a complet PhD who writes about the law. And then I pointed out that I was actually doing complet work. I was doing what I was trained to do as a complet person, because what I did yesterday is I took the declassified annex, because I was looking for a few documents. I was trying to straighten out a few things. And I went from the footnotes. I went from the classified documents incorporated by reference and footnotes into the annex, although we don't get them. And that actually allowed me to understand what was going on with the documents. First of all, what order the documents came in adds more weight to a theory that I had from the start, which is that Durham deliberately confused the order of the documents in that appendix to hide that.
This is outside the scope of the report, but if you want to go there, we asked the Inspector General to take a look at the intelligence that's included in the classified appendix that you looked at, and said that ought to affect portions of his report.
It's not just that he discovered that these emails were fabricated. It's that he discovered that the SVR had a plan to frame Hillary Clinton, and at that point he was 2 years into this investigation of Hillary Clinton, and rather than stepping back and saying, whoa, it wasn't Hillary, it was SVR framing Hillary Clinton, he instead kept going.
And should be of concern to any American who cares about our civil liberties, the rule of law, and the just and proportionate application of the law.
And so he tries to hide that in the appendix. And by going to the footnotes and saying, well, this is what document they say actually is there, and this is what document they say is actually there, it gave me more confidence that what happened was on July 26th, and that date comes from Durham, it's one of the few dates he actually gives, after the FBI announced an investigation, and as more and more people were like, Guccifer 2.0 is just Russian spies, on July 26th, SVR said, hey, they've identified Guccifer 2.0. Let's respond to that by starting a conspiracy theory about the deep state. That was July 26th. And then on July 27th, they fabricated the emails that Durham at least conceded were fabricated. They start by saying, here's an email showing that Hillary had a plan. And then they decide, let's add a reference to the Olympics, because remember back in 2016, the U.S. was hammering Russia for doping, their Olympics doping scandal. So that got added on July 27th to an email dated July 25th. And then after that, they wrote an email dated July 27th, and it probably was dated July 27th, still a fabrication, claiming that Hillary, the day earlier, had approved a plan to, at this point, just smear Donald Trump because he was pro-Russian. Durham, in his report itself, went the spies one better and claimed that Hillary had a plan to frame Donald Trump. Down the road, I'm going to show everything we know that happened after that was Russia implementing this plan, not just these two spies, Russia more generally, implementing this plan to frame Hillary Clinton.
Mrs. Clinton was the lie. Mrs. Clinton created the lie. Mrs. Clinton was behind the entire thing.
And it has continued to this day.
This is further evidence that Hillary Clinton approved the Russia hoax against President Trump. Her campaign financed it. Again, she approved it.
And the reason that's important, the reason it's important that it has continued to this day, is the way in which Chuck Grassley, Tulsi Gabbard, I don't know who did these redactions because they basically redacted reference to an entire email. They described that on July 27th, two spooks were illuminating how Clinton was attempting to vilify Moscow, and the redactions trick the reader. They tricked the reader into thinking that the attachment to that email was an email dated July 27th, which it was fabricated, but it claimed that Hillary had just approved the plan. But in fact, what the footnotes tell us, this is me being a complet PhD, what the footnotes tell us is the email that was attached to that plan on July 27th was a fabricated email dated July 25th that did not yet include the part about the Olympics. It said, Hillary's got a plan. They went back and they edited it after July 27th to include, let's add the Olympics. And then, and again, this is in the footnotes, then there's some other email. And attached to that email is the email that's dated July 27th claiming that Hillary Clinton approved this. So that's what you get from the footnotes. And the importance of that, right? So today, Steve Witkoff, who has no training as a diplomat and really has gotten his ass handed to him by Vladimir Putin over and over again, he went to Russia and he's trying to find a way such that Donald Trump can look like he's powerful with Vladimir Putin and do something about Ukraine, right? So Trump promised.
If I were president, and I say this, I will end that war in one day. It'll take 24 hours.
He'd fix Ukraine.
It would be easy. That deal would be easy.
Putin's like, fuck you. I have a plan to take over Ukraine and fuck you. And in the background of that, right, is that Trump wants to look powerful.
I said, President Trump, you said you would solve this issue in a day. What's going on? And, he said, oh, I said that in jest.
He's pissed off at Vladimir Putin, but he can't persuade Vladimir Putin to do what he wants to do for two reasons. One is because Putin wants to do what he wants to do. I mean, Putin cannot stop going after Ukraine because if he does, he's going to lose power. But the second one is Putin is pretty confident he's got enough leverage over Donald Trump that these claims to have power over him are just going to fail. And part of that comes from the way in which Chuck Grassley and Tulsi Gabbard redacted this document to release last week. And the reason why is go back to that email that I just talked about, right? One of the things that redaction serves to hide is that the deep state email starts this all, that everything is downstream from the deep state email, and therefore everything downstream from it is a plan to frame Hillary Clinton, okay? And in releasing this document, whether it was Tulsi or Grassley, I don't know, they redacted it so as to trick readers, so as to make it super hard for people to figure out that this was an SVR plan to frame Hillary and not a Hillary plan to frame Donald Trump. And having done that, right, most readers aren't going to know that email is missing. Most readers aren't going to know that they played fast and loose with those emails. But you know who will know that email is missing? Is Putin's spies. And so you have this situation where Tulsi Gabbard, John Radcliffe, and Kash Patel have all committed to sustaining the claim that Hillary tried to frame Donald Trump, when in fact this declassified appendix proves that in fact this was an SVR plan from the start. From July 26, 2016, this is what we've been chasing ever since, to frame Hillary Clinton. So you have Trump's three top spies, Tulsi Gabbard, Kash Patel, John Radcliffe. They're all into it. They are all sharing a secret with Putin's spies, okay? And they have chosen to release this declassified annex such that they sustain this secret with Putin's spies. But the Russians have that email. The Russians know exactly what email that is. The Russians can reverse engineer in the same way that I just did and say, oh, they're hiding this email, and this email would devastate all of them. This email would take all three of them, plus Donald Trump down, plus the whole right wing.
I'm glad you brought it up because this should be a story every outlet in this room should be covering.
Remember back in when Sally Yates was asked to explain how she dealt with the Mike Flynn problem back in early 2017.
The efforts by a foreign adversary to interfere and undermine our democratic processes and those of our allies pose a serious threat to all Americans.
Which is that after Barack Obama imposed sanctions on Russia in late December 2016, they expected Putin to retaliate. And instead, Putin did nothing. He's like, I'm just going to wait. And the IC was like, WTF, what happened? And so they went and looked for some explanation. And the explanation they discovered is that Mike Flynn had been working with Sergei Kislyak to undermine those sanctions.
Do not make it go any further than you have to, because I do not want to get us in something that has to escalate on, a tit for tat. You follow me, Ambassador?
Basically, he said to Sergei Kislyak, hold on, don't worry about it. Let's get past inauguration and we'll take care of the sanctions. And around January 9th, so even before Trump was inaugurated, as this became public that Flynn had spoken with Sergei Kislyak, Flynn orchestrated a lie to Mike Pence. He told Mike Pence that he hadn't talked about sanctions with Sergei Kislyak. And that freaked out everyone in the IC. That freaked out the national security state, because they were like, Flynn has a lie that he is keeping from Mike Pence, and therefore probably from everybody else. It turns out that Donald Trump was in on it. Mike Pence wasn't, but Donald Trump was in on it from the start. And so they worried. I mean, what it looked like at that point, by all appearances, was Mike Flynn was secretly undermining American policy, both Obama's and Trump's, without Trump's knowledge.
I was disappointed to learn that the facts that had been conveyed to me by General Flynn were inaccurate.
Now, eventually they discovered that Trump was in on it. And so they needed to figure out why he was lying. And Sally Yates explained this.
Not only did we believe that the Russians knew this, but that they likely had proof of this information. And that created a compromise situation, a situation where the national security advisor essentially could be blackmailed by the Russians.
She was like, the problem is now Russia has leverage over Mike Flynn because they know he has a secret, right? Russia knows what happened in the conversation with Sergei Kislyak. Flynn has lied about it publicly, and that gives Russia leverage over Mike Flynn. This is same, by the way, when Trump lied on July 27th, 2016, about whether he was still chasing business deals with Russia.
There were developers in Russia that wanted to put a lot of money into developments in Russia, and they wanted us to do it, but it never worked out. Frankly, I didn't want to do it for a couple of different reasons.
Michael Cohen described he knew it was a lie as soon as Trump said it.
Can you share what communication the president had with Michael Cohen about Trump Tower Moscow? And can you share the last time they talked about Trump Tower Moscow?
Probably can't do that if I wasn't his lawyer at the time. I can tell you, however, before the investigation, during the period that they're looking at, they did have conversations about it. The conversations lasted throughout parts of 2016. The president is not sure exactly when they ended.
Because Cohen had, during the campaign, contacted Dmitry Peskov's office pursuing this impossibly lucrative Trump Tower deal that would have involved GRU and a sanctioned bank and so on. And so from that point forward, that was another secret that Trump was keeping and that Russian spies were keeping over him. And that made it very difficult. When there was an investigation, that meant he had a secret to keep. Again, that gave Russia leverage over him. This is exactly the same kind of situation as happened with Mike Flynn back in 2017. All three of Trump's spies are in on a secret with Putin's spies, and they redacted that document so we wouldn't know that. But that still means that the Russian spies do. The Russian spies know that Trump and his three top spies all are desperate to keep this secret that they've been keeping with SVR spies going back to 2016. So when Witkoff went into that meeting today with Vladimir Putin, who looked like, he looked like it did in Helsinki.
After all, I was an intelligence officer myself. And I do know how dossiers are made up.
He just keeps knowing that he's got something on these guys. Trump's three top spies had just given Vladimir Putin more leverage against Trump and against Witkoff because they doubled down on this secret. They doubled down on a secret that they've been keeping since 2016.